Hi everyone, this is Ronnie with Everything Vive. I have the pleasure of speaking with Jennifer Dowding today. She's the senior producer for Evasion at Archiact. Welcome to the show, Jennifer. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so I guess before we get into Evasion, which is going to be the main topic for today's episode, I wanted to know a little bit more about you. Like, how did you get involved with VR and with Archiact?
Sure. So I was previously working in mobile games with DNA was the company I was at, and unfortunately the studio in Vancouver closed. And at the time, so that was a little over 3 years ago, about 3.5 years ago. And then I was really, really intrigued when I sort of met with Archiact, and I was seeing kind of the incredible experience that I could have just using cardboard, actually. So that just a cardboard in my room was one of the very first things that really kind of sold VR to me. And that was before, that was back, there was DK2 for the Oculus, and I had known about it, but I hadn't really given it a try at that point.
Yeah.
And then I joined the team, so and we were doing mostly mobile development at the time. So they had a product called Lamper. They were wanting to launch on the Gear VR. And at the time, it was a smaller studio. It was about 24 people.
Okay.
And they were a little bit frazzled as to how to actually execute and launch games. So I joined to help them kind of make a schedule and actually start to get products out. So after that, we did a lot of publishing in China. We helped publish games from here in North America. Over in China. We worked closely with E. McNeil on some of his titles, Darknet, etc. And we worked with some companies in China. And then we were also developing our own products in-house. We did Lamper. We did a game called Waddle Home, which eventually came out on the Vive and was on the PlayStation VR at launch. And then we actually did some work with to roll into Evasion. We were working in UE4. We had gotten a bunch of developers from the Coalition here in Vancouver, which works on Gears of War, and Capcom. And we were wanting to make arcade shooters multiplayer in Unreal Engine 4. And we did that for a while, and we debuted it at China Joy in 2016. But the team really wanted to start developing, especially for the Vive, actually, wanted to really start making something that we could produce and put out on these sort of the core VR platforms here in North America. And especially as the Oculus was getting the touch, Vive was sort of the number one platform that we wanted to develop on at the time, and that has grown since then.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the formation of the team, and it really came from developing this arcade multiplayer UE4 experience and feeling what that was, and then bringing that co-op multiplayer shooter, but doing all of the assets ourselves, creating the lore ourselves, making our own IP, and developing something that we felt would be a high-quality title for the stores, which we weren't seeing a lot of high-quality shooters that were sort of scratching the itch that we wanted to scratch in terms of gameplay.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear, because I mean, some of the things that stand out to me when I play Evasion that are different from even a lot of the titles that have been real. Like I would say that in the past several months, some of the quality on the titles coming out has increased compared to like maybe a year ago or so. But there's still certain things that I think you guys really nailed in Evasion that I just don't see being done quite enough. Like proper use of cover and like destructible cover in Evasion, for example, or like the fact that like something that really impresses me about the game is just the fact that like literally every projectile that's being launched at you is blockable, is an actual object that you can interact with in some way. And there's something about like just the way you guys made the game in Unreal that like everything has a very like tangible, like very like solid quality to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
the team is really focused on gameplay first. So everything that's in the game is sort of really gray blocked, prototyped first, and we've played with it. And we had a mentality, a really agile mentality with our development process, especially when it came to game design and gameplay. Because VR is relatively new. There's a lot of established sort of best practices for shooters, but when you put them into VR, there's things that work and things that don't work. And sometimes you find things like our tether mechanic that feel completely new, but feel really great for the control mechanism. So we allowed ourselves to lean into things that we found were really positive in the gameplay experience. And we would make those changes like very, very all the way through the process, just tuning and tweaking the gameplay.
Okay, that's one of the things, and I had a chance to talk with Ian Rook like previously. I'm trying to remember what his role is on the.
He's the lead designer on the game.
Okay, yeah, I had talked to him previously. That makes a lot of sense. I talked to him about kind of I think at the time he had focused a lot of his interview on kind of, figuring out what the different classes were going to be like in the game and trying to kind of nail, what that dynamic would be like, especially when you're playing with. And yeah, some of the same things came up about just wanting to make sure that no matter which class you chose as a player, that you were going to have like a fun experience, no matter, And definitely that's something that came out, in the final product. I don't know if you could speak at all to, what it was like, maybe prototyping some of those things, like since, like when I had talked to Ian back at GDC, that was in March of this year, and obviously you guys have worked on the game quite a bit from March until the final release, like. What are some of those things that you guys did? Because at that time, when I had a chance to first play it back at GDC, I mean, like you guys had nailed down like a good feel. Like a lot of the things, like I said, like the level designs and like the basic gameplay mechanics. I mean, they were all showing really strong. But like, what are some of the things that you guys had to do to kind of really nail things down as you were getting closer to release?
So a lot of the mechanics in terms of the classes are in direct relation to sort of two major features, which would be the enemies and how they react. So there's a lot of different kinds of enemies in the game. There are the bipedal enemies called the paragords who like to take cover, like to shoot out your cover. There's the bombers that get really close to you and sort of attack you. In your personal space. There are, and then there are the flying enemies, some of which are very swarm-like, some are more predictable, and others that are just like big tanks. So when developing the classes, a lot of the development came around having those behaviors sort of nailed down, which takes a lot of time and iteration, and then seeing, okay, well, how does each class going to work with this kind of enemy, and is it going to be fun? Is it going to be not fun to fight this enemy with this class, and or is it going to feel good? And obviously there are sort of different classes that work for different kinds of enemies, but just thinking about like what are the kind of core enemies that work really well with this class, and then we would, because we're very co-op focused as well, we would think about, okay, well, how could these two classes combine to fight this kind of enemy, and how would it feel good if this kind of class was fighting with this other class on these enemies? And a lot of that is also just playing it, trial and error, and getting insights from. We had a multiplayer setup in the office, and we had 2 play tests a day where we would rotate people in the team going in and playing levels and things like that. So we were sort of constantly giving feedback, and to the credit of our designers, they take it very well, and did make a lot of adjustments based on sort of a lot of testing and gameplay. And the other thing we did was, just like you were saying at GDC, when we were showing it to people, we were also getting a lot of feedback from that, especially on things like user experience and confusion and anything. And one thing you'll notice is that the mechanics are pretty similar for each character. I mean, so each class, so all of the way that you use the weapon is exactly the same, but the weapon does different things. And that came from wanting, anyone to be able to pick up and play, no matter which class they had tried before. It's simple to pick it up and know how to play and use the weapon.
Mm.
But then obviously the difficulty is in the amount of bullets that are coming at you, which we work very hard to make sure we've got a lot of them. How many enemies are coming at you, and sort of dealing with a lot of different stimuli in the environment.
Yeah, going along those lines, like I have two questions I want to cover, like in response, like you mentioned, the fact that there are tons of sometimes, projectiles, enemies, everything being thrown at you. This is like you guys term
Onslaught.
onslaught, bullet hell shooter. And what were so I guess one of my questions is more technical. The other is more like from a gameplay standpoint. We'll go with the gameplay standpoint one first.
Sure.
What were some of the things you guys learned in developing Evasion as to what's important for difficulty settings for a VR title? So like the reason I have that question is because like you guys nail the feel as far as I'm concerned, it feels like it's a bullet hell shooter, like in VR, right? Like you feel like all of these different projectiles that you can block and dodge, and everything is coming at you, and you see the patterns, and you're shooting them, and it feels like satisfyingly arcadey in that aspect. But like I could imagine to some degree having all of that thrown at the player could be overwhelming, right?
Sure.
And I didn't know how was it easy to find that balance of making it like crazy and hectic and exciting, but also not too difficult for players?
I would say we definitely thought about that quite a lot. The truth is there's no perfect balance that sort of tweaks every gamer with different intuitiveness in the game, but we wanted to get a feel for. Obviously, intensity is a big part of the game, and we wanted to get players to feel that they had actually survived something. And when they went in with co-op, we wanted them to get the sense of like, you and I, we went in there and we, we're sweating a little bit, but we had a memorable experience because we faced off, and even when we thought the chips were down, like we still got through it. And that was a feeling that we really wanted to evoke. Now that the game is live, we've definitely had both feedback, which is like it was, too hard, and I felt too overwhelmed. And then we have obviously, you have the opposite, which is people being like, it was too easy.
That's so funny.
Which is
I'm definitely I'm probably in the middle because for me it was one of those things like when I play it's definitely put like the stress levels go up like as far as like man like we got to get through this, and then as soon as you're finished you're like all right, did it save I can't do that again. It was so crazy. And then
Yeah, for sure. So even now, we're still gauging sort of customer reaction on that and looking at it. But we feel that we hit, if that's the case, where some people are saying it's a little bit too hard, and some people are saying, oh, I didn't feel it was hard enough. We're definitely taking a look at that right now and looking at what is causing that. And partially we think maybe there's a few difficulty spikes that we might want to iron out in updates and sort of tune that a little bit more. But on our side, it was, using the back history of the game designers that I have and their intuition on it. We also had a lot of, people who play a lot of shooters in the office and getting their intuition on it. And then just sometimes the demos would provide feedback on that. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky thing. We're pretty happy with where it landed.
Yeah. No, I like I said, I agree. I think it captures the feeling you get when you play a lot of the other like more traditional bullet hell type shooters. Yeah. And so that's why, and I would imagine that those games, I'm sure you have some people that play like even just the first stage of some of the more like hardcore games, and they're just like, "Yep, I'm done. I can't play this," or like. So this is like very common for the genre, but like specifically since this is one of the first games like this in VR. and how people don't necessarily I would imagine for some people they don't know exactly what they're getting themselves into with certain games until they try them for the first time. So yeah, I was just kind of curious like on that, and that makes a lot of sense. And then yeah, so my other question regarding just how much you're throwing at players is how easy, difficult, like how long did it take you guys to kind of iron things out from the technical side? Because yeah, I was really impressed with how well the game runs in general. And like I think I ended up turning like some of the resolution settings down on my computer. I have a slower CPU, but in general, like I mean, I have like it's like a third generation i7, so it's nothing new. And I have a good graphics card, whatever, but like the game runs really well. And like I said, I think it's surprising to see all of those projectiles being like launched at you and being actual objects that you can interact with, and not having a ton of slowdown from all of that being processed. So
yeah, absolutely. That's we're really proud of that. We had a really, I think my lead engineer was a really good he was very good at making sure that we were giving the time to bug fixing and performance. But I think one of the things that you can definitely thank is, so when we took on PlayStation VR, which was definitely later in our process, we had to get it performant on PlayStation Base and PlayStation Pro. And although that does take a significant portion of our schedule, in our case, it took about 6 to 8 months, that work in performance is what makes it run really smooth on a lot of different computers. And we were actually able to take our graphics card requirement down to a 960 from a 970. We were able to make a more significant difference in destruction on the i7 versus the i5 and really sort of amp up the i7. And we were able to make a really great game that works on a PlayStation, no matter what PlayStation you've got, and basically all different kinds of CPUs and GPUs. So this was a big process in terms of getting it performant, especially to pass the technical requirements on PlayStation. And a lot of innovation from the art team and the engineering team. And we built internal tools for constantly checking FPS and performance. And we measured all the time. And this was about a 6-month project of getting it performant. And we're really happy with the results. We also did a lot of bug fixing in that time. So we're really happy to ship a product that feels good on every device, and also is very low in bugs from what we've what we've gleaned from the community. So we're extremely proud of that. We're really happy with Evasion as what we launched. We were obviously nervous like any other team, especially a small team like ours. And so now we can not so much focus on bug fixing or performance as we move towards updates.
Yeah, no, and one of the things I appreciate about the game is just the fact that, like you said, like from the time you open it until like everything's really straightforward, and like all the modes that are there, like as far as like whether you just want to play by yourself, play with friends, enter different levels, like everything works just like immediately, and there's not any kind of weird glitches or any weird like and everything. So yeah, I appreciate that. Like on that front, I guess, yeah, because it seems like, if I recall correctly, like you guys made the PlayStation VR announcement a little after GDC. It was like sometime around that. So like, was that just out of like, had you guys anticipated perhaps, releasing it on PlayStation VR, or was that kind of a surprise to you? And how did that kind of shift gears a little bit?
We definitely had started working on PlayStation VR before we announced, but we were we were in talks with Sony in the year previous, in the year previous, to start doing a PSVR version. And I guess it's a little bit different than some other games that have come out because they've done exclusive deals to come out on PlayStation first, like Moss. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to do anything different with our PC product, because as you know, we had been really dedicated towards it. So there was a little bit of time of figuring that out and working with Sony, and Sony was a great partner in helping us bring it to the platform. And then, but we knew that the challenge really lied in performance. One thing that a lot of my team utilized to get that performance work done is Epic had recently put out talks, especially at GDC, about getting Fortnite onto mobile and making it really performant. And those are talks that, like, my team frequently is watching any Epic talk together, and those ones helped us out a lot, even though they might seem really unrelated. Performance tricks are performance tricks.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like I would imagine, because on mobile platforms too, you're probably like similar to the current consoles, it's more of like they're more performant on the GPU side, right? Rather than like the C. Like I would imagine some of the hardest things to kind of nail down, it would be the CPU restraints on like the PlayStation, for example.
Yeah,
and
that's something that we had pushed with Intel on the i7. So it was a lot of getting everything performant and using every trick in the book to do it, but also trying to maintain the high graphics quality. And the truth was, we actually made the game look better while we were doing it, because we really reassessed every asset. We assessed like every trick we could in terms of making things look really beautiful. And in the end, we had a cleaner, better game.
Yeah. No, like I said, it runs great on my system. And like, I mean, in my experience with VR titles, like more so than anything, it's the performance that really like makes the experience feel fluid and polished and really like that's like if the game is jittery or stuttering at all, like that kind of throws you out more so than like, you know, a slightly simplified, you know, geometry or, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so and I think, like, for us, you know, there are things that obviously don't come out in reviews, and players don't need to care or know about these things, but as a team, launching the game on all 3 platforms at once is a pretty big feat. Not very many games have done it. Launching a game that's really performant, a game that's low on bugs, and a game with, like, sensible user experience and UI that you can just sort of quickly get into. Our focus with usability was really on getting players into the gameplay as soon as possible and making the gameplay really intuitive from a controls perspective. So those are all goals we wanted as a team, and we're really proud that we achieved them.
No, that's awesome. And I don't know the answer to this question, so I thought I'd ask. Like, are players able to play each other from other platforms, or?
No, we don't have crossplay between the platforms. This is sort of because all of the platforms have their own multiplayer systems that you have to implement, and so getting those different systems to talk to each other is quite a large feat. We actually, to tell you the truth, we actually spoke a lot with Survios about it, and it was a massive project for them to be able to do it, and we just didn't have the resources to take it on.
I gotcha. No, that's fair. I mean, in and of itself, like I said, I was kind of shocked when I heard that it was coming to PlayStation VR, because like my experience with the game at GDC was that it was very much like, you know, one of the most impressive, especially from just what the game was doing technically, one of the most impressive like high-end VR titles I had played. So when I saw Evasion announced for PlayStation VR, and some of the other like Survios ones like Creed and some of those other that were more technically impressive on the PC side, I was like, man, how are all these studios gonna do it with, you know, the lower but I mean, it seems like everybody's pulling it off, so that's amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Survios is a bigger team. We're a bigger team for VR. Definitely, we're a bigger team compared to a lot of the teams we meet with. So we're very lucky to be in a position to be able to have the resources to do it.
Yeah, so I guess like now that you guys have launched Evasion and the game is out in players' hands, what are some of the things that you guys like has anything developed that you guys weren't really expecting, or like what are you guys now that the product's out, what are your next steps as far as Evasion and looking forward?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at what people are saying about the product. Like you were saying, there's some difficulty discussion. We're definitely taking a look at that, and what would be sort of the natural next step. And we are, as a company or as a team, we're also looking towards the future, towards next projects and products as well. I think the real thing that Evasion team wants to build on is all of the great tech that we've built for Evasion, and definitely moving that into another product. So we're really excited about whatever we make next is going to be this plus a lot more, which is great, because obviously everybody wants more features, everybody wants more time on a game, but you have to get it out there. And for us, it was 2.5 years.
No,
but
and
now we have a really
yeah.
solid team and a solid piece of core technology, and we're really excited to build on that.
Yeah, no, one of the things I appreciate about Evasion is just the fact that when you guys did release it, I mean, with the modes that you guys, included and all of that, like I said, everything works and is polished, and like it's very clear that like you wanted to make sure you had like a well-rounded product when you actually released. Like, there's a lot of VR games out there that, like, especially some of the more ambitious ones that are coming from smaller teams, where they release like an early access, and they're very, very light on features, like to the point where the core gameplay mechanics really aren't ironed out yet. And that's clearly not what you guys did with Evasion. Like, whether there's going to be more levels or not or anything like that, like it's clear that you guys like figured out what you wanted the game to be, and really saw like you wanted to make sure that you completed that vision before you released something. So
yeah, that was our goal with the game. We didn't really want to do that kind of half out the door, but we're still working on it. What do you guys think? We did want to release a complete product, and something that we then took the time to polish it and make it and each element feel really good. So that's the way that we wanted to release the product. It's just not in our sort of. I guess the difficulty with doing that kind of early access is, and then continuing to build it while it's out is, is it missing core elements when you launch it? Are you going to have the time to polish it? Are you going to just chase public opinion in terms of reactionary features? We really didn't want to do that.
Yeah, no, because I mean, I had somebody on the show last episode actually talking about just like user design and all of that kind of stuff, and sometimes the feedback you're getting from players like on face might say one thing, and the reality behind what people are experiencing is something completely different that you need to tweak. I mean,
people you're also only getting sort of your loudest group, right? And there's a lot of people who play and aren't going to say anything at all. And we just, that's a real tough scenario to build. With the constant feedback. I mean, on a mobile side, in other games and in many products now that are more about almost like games as a service, like Battlefront and Overwatch, you're sort of adding to the game, and you're definitely using data to and that player comments as a way to fuel the updates and things like that. But early access feels a bit different, where you're still building the game, and that can be that sounds like a real struggle.
Yeah, no, I agree, because and I mean from the customer side of things too, it's hard to like keep track of what's actually being done in a lot of the games, because
I don't want to sell anyone anything that's unfinished. That's a big thing.
Yeah, no. Like I said, no, I appreciate that, and that's something that like shows. Like I said, like it's not every day where like you load up like a a game like this and just everything works right off the bat, and it's just amazing. Like, unfortunately, in Steam, like that's been the
but
case. So.
I definitely feel for a team that does that, puts it out there because they feel like we've run out of runway and we sort of need to start generating revenue. I think that's kind of the case with the Gunheart team.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, whatever. Every game is a miracle, and whatever teams have to do to stay in the game and keep making good stuff that people like, I truthfully, I'm for it. I just didn't want to have to do that with my team.
Well, that's awesome. With recent announcements like, Oculus Quest and a lot of things like, down the road as far as like the future of VR hardware is concerned, like what are some of the things that you guys are most excited about in terms of like future developments in VR?
Man, 2080s is pretty exciting. Bigger, fatter graphics cards is definitely something we're really excited about. I mean, my team specifically likes to go for that a bit more hardcore audience and development. We just really love the kind of really high fidelity look. We really like utilizing UE4 to its, for all of the great features it can pack in. And like I said, like when you're developing bullet hell, more projectiles, more enemies, more characters, that's something that we're sort of the kind of team that wants to lean into. The Oculus Quest from a VR perspective is awesome because, man, throwing a headset into your backpack is and just being able to play it anywhere in any situation and having it have room awareness is super cool. So that's definitely something as a studio we're really taking a look at. I had a chance to play Evasion. I don't have one of the WiGig, the new wireless adapters for the Vive, but I did get to play it at a convention with someone who with Intel because they had our game and that was awesome. I don't know what the official word is from reviews, but I didn't experience any latency in Evasion. Yeah. And so I thought that's really exciting because from a prototype perspective, to be able to start working with a wireless environment is actually quite awesome. And when we were originally developing Evasion, we were doing a lot of ducking and moving as a part of our gameplay. We changed that a bit when we leaned really into locomotion, but I can just imagine that the games that will come out for those wireless headsets may be really exciting to watch people play because they can really move around and use the space a little bit more without feeling tethered. So I was really excited about the Dead and Buried sort of room scale.
Oh, that looked amazing.
at Oculus Connect. I had played Dead and Buried on what is now the Quest, but what was the previous name, Santa Cruz.
Yeah, Santa Cruz.
And it was a really fun game to play. So that's super exciting. I think location-based experiences. I'm a big fan of the Void. Those are all very exciting because it's kind of that high-end, almost like roller coaster, almost like Disney Imagineering level of using VR. So instead of having to build a Disneyland in real life and have that kind of footprint, you can take one space and make it into 100 different worlds. So that's very exciting. That's something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of that. And like you, I mean, I usually am using tethered systems right now, but in the situations where I've got to mess around with wireless stuff, like you just notice right off the bat that you play differently when you don't have a wire. Like all of a sudden, like whether it was, something that like is conscious or not, when you have that wire behind you, you like subconsciously feel like you have to be a little bit more reserved in what you're doing. And then all of a sudden when that's gone, it's like the way you're interacting and moving around in the world, like the same exact game is just completely different.
Yeah, I mean, well, I even because I play on the three systems all the time, PlayStation and Oculus and then Vive, I I move less on the Vive now than I used to. When I first was just doing Vive stuff, I was
Mm-hmm.
moving much more in my space. But
Mm-hmm.
once you get used to Oculus or PlayStation, you kind of lose that intuition.
Yeah.
So trying out the wireless made me think about that again. And from a game design perspective, it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and I noticed that too, right? Like when I started using my Rift a little bit more, like you start getting used to using one of those sticks or one of the pads to like do snap turning and all that
Yeah,
kind of like all of a sudden like your brain kind of gets hardwired to use some of those shortcuts. And
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of yeah, and then
That's
and then and then 100%. Like when you lose that wire all of a sudden, like I noticed when I would come back from doing a lot of wireless stuff to wired
mm,
headsets, I would get tangled up a lot more
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
one of those things like I would start playing things and doing all kinds of circles and not thinking about it, and I would come back here and start doing the same types of things and like like almost
yeah.
fall over. So yeah, it's kind of it's interesting. Like I wonder where all that stuff is going to end up, and I think Oculus Quest will have like in addition to allowing people to not have to be tethered. Hopefully, it'll get a lot of people that haven't had a chance to try some of the high end systems a chance to do that because I mean PlayStation VR was obviously a huge success because so many people out there
Hmm.
have PlayStations. But
Yeah.
I think selling a product to people that might not necessarily even have a game system at all is something that's going to be a huge sell. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think it'll make more industries sort of get involved in VR and in trying something out because the wires are a little bit out of the way on a device like that.
Hmm.
So I hope it becomes the mass market has a little bit more knowledge about the devices, and that will just bring more developers into the fold and grow the community, I think.
No, I agree. And I look forward to seeing more of those developments as we get closer to the spring. So,
Yeah.
uh, awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And like I've been having a ton of fun with Evasion. Like ironically, I haven't had a chance to play the game
Yeah.
yet with some of my colleagues, but I'm gonna get them
Oh, yeah.
in soon to really like because I know that like if I'm having this much fun just playing by myself, I can only imagine I'm gonna get like the full experience once I get them into the game too. So
Yeah, the avatars are really it's like a big favorite feature of mine of seeing the full body avatars in there, and we've done a ton of work getting that really really nice. So I think they're some of the highest quality avatars that you'll see in a VR game. You can
nice.
quote me on that.
All right.
And they both on PlayStation and on PC. So check that out. I often recommend like one of my favorite experiences is playing. I'm really small, so I'm only 5 feet. So I get in there with the warden, and I look like kind of a toy version of the warden.
That's really
And then I
funny.
get in there with like one of my lead devs who's like 6'5", and he'll play as an engineer, and so he's the female character, and it's like a whole like Gwendolyn Christie experience where I'm like, oh my god, you're so tall and badass, and I'm like this tiny stocky hero. I mean, there's a lot of fun you can get in there with that, and the avatars are so great. They have all these little things hanging off of them, and it just adds a whole other level to co-op gameplay. Being able to wave at each other is still one of the coolest things. Dancing around is so
Yeah.
cool.
Just having
Getting into
having
filling
presence
pools
is
with each
amazing.
other is like, okay, I'm gonna get in there with you, and you still have that kind of moment where you're like, are we too close? I don't know.
No,
And
yeah,
that's
no. That's one of the coolest things about co-op in VR is just like the level of presence that you get when all of a sudden like you see another player actually moving around like they would like in real life.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's completely different than playing multiplayer games non VR. Like there's
I've
just
had meetings in there. I've sort of played with people I've never met, but still seen them wave and move in VR. I have a feeling like I know that person.
yeah.
It's a really amazing thing, especially when you're like, okay, you're very far away, but we're in here together, and it's I mean, over voice chat, it's just like being in the same room.
No, I totally agree. It's like it's magic. So.
It is magic.
All right. Well, what's the best way that people can keep track of like what you're up to as far as VR is
Yeah.
concerned, and then also Archiact's next projects, next steps.
Yeah, we're for Evasion, we're on pretty much all the social media. So we're really active on Twitter and Facebook, and we have a Reddit presence as well. We also have evasionvrgame.com where we do blog posts. Our Steam page also has blog posts for those of you who are on Steam. And then archiactvr.com for general Archiact stuff. And
Okay.
we do blog posts there as well. And I'm VRGen on Twitter.
Awesome.
At Jennifer Dowding, my first name, last name, and I post a lot about Evasion.
All right, good. So you guys, add them on Twitter and keep up with everything because like I said, like I really like Evasion and I can't wait to see like how you guys take those ideas, concepts, tech, and bring it to the next level in your next project. So.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the support.
Yep, no problem. All right, well, take care, and I'll be with all of you guys.
I'll see you in VR.